Magic 4. What will you learn in Magic 4? You will learn the connections between content, context, form and presentation steps and create unique combinations with 4 principles. The internet, books, and courses are full of information on how to use architectural software. Unfortunately, this information is not enough for you to combine original ideas with technical infrastructure to create designs that will impress the jury. In this section, you will see the questions you need to ask and answer on a sample area. You will find both basic issues such as location and climate, and niche questions that are not very popular but quite effective. When these questions are combined with basic ones, a very sophisticated analysis process will emerge. You must have a manual notebook. An architect's notebook which you can both take notes and sketch. Because in this section, if you lay the right foundation and understand the importance of the relationship it establishes with the environment rather than the building itself, it will be much easier for your project to be appreciated. If you want to see how the steps you have seen in this section have visual equivalents, you can take a look at the diagrams section during breaks. As you answer your questions, you will begin to build your project. Good luck. Here we go. Main topics of Magic 4. Content, site and building type. Context, geographical, sociocultural and historical. Form, discovery, analysis, invention, integration and form development. And presentation, all-in-one and combining pieces. Magic 4. Content. What will you learn in Content section? In the Content section you will learn about the basic information needed to define the project area and how to evaluate it. This information will be needed to be able to relate the links in the next context step. A site. Question 1. In which country and city is the project area located? The best way to gather location information about the area is to use all sources together. Let's see in order. Be sure to obtain the DWG of the project area. Find out what you can do with Google Earth Pro or Apple Maps. You will find the necessary information in the links below this video. When making the first description of the area, use expressions such as at City A, B District C neighborhood, between D and E streets, close to neighborhood H where F and G buildings are located. Do not hesitate to collect all the location information you have about the area as if you were making a collage. Next, you will organize them. Be sure to give the names of all streets and intersections surrounding your building. Also get the exact coordinates with the help of Google Earth. You may need it. So, have you thought of researching a data mining study in the field? Find research, surveys, user reviews and user preferences for the region by searching for the name of the region along with the keyword data mining. Search databases for location information associated with the area. Search for articles and dissertations. Search in detail on YouTube and Reddit. Start thinking about the space in layers, like the image you see on the left. Pedestrian roads, carriageways, urban fullness, urban voids. List them all. A site. Question 2. How many square meters is the area and what are the lengths of the area? Measuring the area is not just measuring two lengths. The lengths of the surrounding structures, the areas of urban spaces serving similar functions, the dimensions of the focal structures. All of them can be included in these measurements. With Google Earth Pro, you can measure the area you want. With Apple Maps, you can have an idea about the hierarchy of dimensions in the area by accessing detailed three-dimensional modeling images of many important locations. The area may already be occupied uncontrollably by pedestrians and vehicles. But the size and variety of these irregular spreading spots should also give you an idea. One of the most common mistakes is to download project samples from the internet in the form of ready-made DWGs. Of course, you can also download decent samples from trusted sources by paying the license fee. However, some drawings are not in the correct scale and may need to be converted to the unit of measurement you use. At this point, you should be sure which sources you refer to using metric or imperial measures. Of course, it is not necessary for the determinations of the measurement to be included in a competition sheet. However, sometimes the dimensions of the project area, your design, or the surrounding structures can turn into linear steps that you use in the context phase. Apart from this, it would be a mistake in terms of visual professionalism to cover the drawings for presentation with dimension lines unless necessary. A site. Question 3. Which buildings are there on the parcel surrounding the area? When describing the location of your area, simply giving coordinates and street/intersection names is definitely not enough. You must have done a detailed study of the structures surrounding your work area. Therefore, you should also find answers to the following sub-questions that appear as subheadings of the main question. What are the floor heights of the buildings surrounding the study area? If you don't have a floor analysis of the neighborhood, you should do it and compare the floors of these buildings to grasp the vista potentials in your area. What are the most important structures surrounding the study area? Which structures are important for the elderly, which structures for the children, which structures for the disabled, which structures are important for the employees? What are the facade characteristics of these buildings? Is there a common front language? Is each facade different? Will it be necessary to consider design criteria in the historical environment? If I'm designing in a historical environment, should I reference similarity or contrast? What are the main floor and jamb alignments? Can I design my facades with reference to these alignments? How does the project area look from these structures? Is it possible for me to look at the project area and take 360-degree photos from the balconies of these structures or, if possible, from the roof terrace? B. Building type. Question 1. Which functions are included in the program? Have you reviewed the competition specifications before? Now, the first thing you need to do is find architectural competitions related to the projects that are most similar to the project you are working on and download the specifications of all of them to your computer. As you examine the different specifications, you'll recognize the differences in the way functions are related. Of course, you can also do this by directly examining the floor plans of the buildings, but reading the plans is not as practical and systematic as reading the Functional Program tab in the specifications. For example, let's take the Needs program in the specifications of two DIY store project competitions. In one, the cafeteria may be located under the heading of Entrance Hall, while in the other it may be located under the heading of Food and Beverage Units. In these two cases, the relationship of the place with the toilets, the technical volume, and the service parking lot will change. Only one who has studied enough specifications and requirements programs can quickly think and design about combinations of functions. Since this maturity will be reflected in the drawings, it easily affects the jury. In terms of competitions, one of the best aspects of reviewing specifications is getting to know the members of the jury. Although your job is to produce a quality project, the issues that the jury cares about may differ in the context of their careers. In some competitions, the concept may precede technical detail drawings, for example. By examining the works of the jury members, the sensitivities in architectural productions that determine their careers can be tried to be understood. Of course, what matters is whether you can produce an original and effective project. B. Building type. Question 2. What is the hierarchy between functions? Draw it. Let's move on to the relations between functions. In a function program, all fields appear in a specific order. But you, as the designer, may need to rearrange this order to create new relationships. Of course, the main titles do not change. However, crosslinks that will make your project unique will deepen the context of the project and add meaning and depth to your design. It is sometimes forgotten that the main thing in competitions is the different solutions that the space produces for different scenarios, rather than the space itself. Working on a competition project or architectural design course project actually means telling a spatial story. Let's try to explain this issue in the context of an educational structure project. For example, if there is an outdoor sports area function that cuts off the access of the students leaving the cafeteria to the toilets, the network of this function should be rearranged. It is also a problem if the corridor to which the student workshops are connected causes noise to be heard in the teacher's room. If the meeting room interrupts the circulation between the manager's room and the assistant, this shows that we cannot apply the function program to the floor as it is. In any case, sketching a hierarchical requirement program as bubble diagrams is the best solution, as it allows us to relate functions in a different but functional way. Summary of the content section. A. Site, location, area, measurements. In which country and city is the project area located? How many square meters is the area and what are the lengths of the area? Which buildings are there on the parcel surrounding the area? B. Building type, functional necessities. What functions are included in the requirement program? What is the hierarchy between functions? Magic 4. Context. What will you learn in context section? In the context section you will learn how to construct a contextual organization rather than attempting to construct a structure directly in the project area. You will find that the jury is actually voting not on the form of the building, but on the sophistication of the understanding and organizational skills that the building adds to its environment. Amateurs often work on a project with only the data from the content step. Context is the main step that ensures that your project is original, innovative, and solution-oriented. A1. Location. Question 1. How do pedestrians reach the area? Is there a study on satisfaction rates? Let's give some examples on this subject. 1. A high school students skate here after school. 2. In the morning, the shuttle bus for the textile factory workers departs from the northern sidewalk of this area. 3. Mobile grocers open stalls in this area in the evening. 4. Neighbors and local shopkeepers are uncomfortable with the neighborhood kids playing football here. You can multiply examples and strengthen your context. A1. Location. Question 2. How do vehicles reach the area? Is there a study on satisfaction rates? Let's give some examples on this subject too. 1. Some taxis prefer to wait for customers on the south side of the area. 2. The users of the office building, which is 1 kilometer away from the area, use the area as a parking lot. This is also due to the fact that they do not pay a parking fee. 3. It is also possible to see some crocs left in the field. There are also vendors selling croc here. Yes, it is up to you to diversify the examples here too. A1. Location. Question 3. Does the area have a relevance to special routes such as running/cycling tracks? Of course, in most cities, it is not possible to come across such a dense network of bike or jogging tracks. However, keep in mind that you can develop some strategies in your field to ensure bike lane or racetrack continuity in urban spaces of various sizes. If you can add these strategies to your design steps, you will include many decisions that may affect the form and layout of your building. This takes your work one step further. A1. Location. Question 4. Can the area be used for the continuity of a green urban axis? The continuity of green, which is also considered as public spaces, should be discussed as one of the most important design strategies, just as the traces on the tracks are reflected onto the area. Of course, it is not difficult to guess that you are asking a question in your mind: how will I detect and mark these elliptical spots? The answer is simple: diagram all sequences by taking periodic photographs of the area. Check out the examples in the diagrams section. A1. Location. Question 5. Can the area be used for the continuity of an urban-scale water element? The water element can show you that you can use some design details that are not often thought of. For example, water collected on the roofs of some pilot buildings can create special artificial lake units or water lily ponds in the area. Or neighbors may be asked in which part of the project area they would like to see a water element. The answers of the users in these surveys will define the landscape and affect the main lines of the design in the area. A1. Location. Question 6. Could the site be part of a custom-designed experience route? Have you ever worked on experience routes? For example, how do visitors navigate a site? What is the most enjoyable or shortest way to get from building A to building B? Can intersecting routes create a new invisible web? Can users with similar preferences act on common experience routes in the field? Do the preference criteria of the buildings overlap or intersect? Here you have to think of your building as an algorithm that optimizes all user preferences. A1. Location. Question 7. Is there a municipal strategy that facilitates the implementation of special solutions for children, the elderly, and the disabled? For example, the elderly may prefer secluded spots away from vehicle noise, while children may prefer muddy areas where they can run around. Some organic textures formed over the years may also be suitable for the disabled. Considering all these together, a visual harmony unique to the field is seen. Again, the best way to represent this unity is to divide the use of the space into sequences by photographing the space at certain time intervals. A2. Climate. Question 1. What is the sunshine hours of the area? It is important in which hemisphere your building is located, at what angle, and at what time it receives the sun. Links that will help you use meteorological data with an architectural expression technique on your map will be given below the video. However, remember that you are doing this research like an architect, not an engineer. Sunbathing is not the only factor for the form of the building. Of course, it is still essential to know that a living area and a study room will not receive light from the same direction. A2. Climate. Question 2. What is the prevailing wind direction of the area? Is the wind felt most in the courtyard of the building? Does it provide natural coolness in corridors? Are there natural wind tunnels in the area? Prevailing wind direction is just as important as sunbathing. It directly affects the placement angles of buildings and facilitates the optimization of window placements required for natural ventilation. You will also find links to important resources on this subject below the video. A2. Climate. Question 3. What is the climate of the region? Finally, it would be helpful to be aware of the remaining climate criteria. For this, it would be best to use meteorological data together with user surveys. The biggest risk of dealing with these studies is the confusion that comes with too much information. Gather information, of course, but be careful which ones you use. You cannot use all of the climate data you collect. Be sure to check out the links below the video. B1. Location. Question 1. What are the focal structures in neighboring plots? What meaning do they have for users? Will focal structures be more important than your design? Or will your design put on a more dominant show than any other building in the area? It would be a huge mistake to make a decision on this subject without doing enough research. Again, taking periodic photos will be a great way to observe the area. Analyze how long users of focal structures spend in and around your workspace. Thanks to this analysis, your preliminary draft will appear automatically. B1. Location. Question 2. What are the focal structures in the neighborhood where the project is located? What are their meanings? Do they already have a relevance to the project or can they have in the future? What if the area is now home to seasonal circuses, skateboarders, homeless people? What to do then? In such cases, it is best to create spaces or surfaces that will remind the current users of the space after the new design. Yes, a circus tent can no longer be here, one can no longer wake up here, but architectural humor can be created by making the traces of urban memory felt directly in the building design or in the walls, furnishings, landscape and flooring. B1. Location. Question 3. What are the most important focal structures in the city where the project is located? What are their meanings? Do they already have a relevance to the project or can they have in the future? Question 4. Should the space be publicly inviting or should it be closed and private? Question 5. Should the building be an icon or an harmonizer? Or can the positive features of both types be considered together? Sometimes it is necessary to take into account not only the focal structures in the close neighborhoods, but also the distant foci that directly affect the identity of the city. In Delirious New York, Koolhaas shows with many different examples how the character of a city can have a say in the designs to be made in that city. Check out below for similar examples. Keep in mind that due to the dense texture of the city, it can help you establish numerous relationships of context. Read what Kevin Lynch wrote about the image of the city. C1. Past and today. Question 1. For what purposes was the area used in the past? Do these purposes contain such valuable details that they can be indirectly included in the design today? Summarize the past usage of the field and associated meanings with 5 keywords. Old traces may not always be preserved through restoration or renovation. However, as we mentioned before, the concept of urban memory is a context component that never gets old. Do you know which buildings were the scene of your work area in history? How many of these traces can you add to your architectural language again today? Of course, you won't be working on Baroque, Gothic or Rococo today, but you can minimally recall the original details from the past with a modern and modular detail. C2. Future. Question 1. For what purpose can the space be used in the future? What would be the most appropriate functions that prepare the area for the future? For instance, is there a possibility that the area will be included in a sustainability scenario? Summarize the prominent concepts regarding the future potentials of the area with 5 keywords. These keywords will give you clues as to how you should handle a future modulation. While working on this, don't get stuck with just one of the concepts like biophilic design, metaverse, sustainability, 3D print concrete. Or don't try them all and drown in the information pool. You will prepare a modular, contemporary setup in which all technological developments can be integrated. Architecture means a flexible grid. It is not a static decorative art. D. Multitasking. You need to make inferences by considering all layers together. For this you will need to assess all the sketches together. Look at the examples. 1. When pedestrians reach the area mainly from the south and east directions, they draw an elliptical route to the center of the area. 2. The points where the area is used as a parking lot are mainly southwest, southeast, north and northeast corners. 3. The expansion areas of a route that can be integrated into existing cycling/running routes may be on the southwest-northeast axis. 4. Green spots supporting the continuity of urban parks and public spaces can be designed at the intersection of these routes. 5. Water elements can be used as the invert of green spots. Sustainability scenarios can also be emphasized. 6. Social formations and independent initiatives can frame the primary selections affecting area. 7. Determining the areas actively preferred by the elderly, disabled and children determines the public space arrangements surrounding the building and how the entrances will be located. 8. The movement areas of the users and visitors of the neighboring focal structures define the density areas close to the boundaries of the plot. 9. Frequently preferred routes define the current use of the site. 10. In order to strengthen the context, some details of the buildings that are not located in the neighborhood but define the identity of the city can be included. 11. Multifragmentation and binary grouping in the past use of the field can be re-evaluated in a grid order that will facilitate the implementation of future predictions. 12. And while doing all this, an approach that has aesthetic concerns and takes into account that a balanced modulation will remain valid in the future should be observed. Summary of the context section. A. Geographical context. Location, associated axles. 1. How do pedestrians reach the area? Is there a study on satisfaction rates? 2. How do vehicles reach the area? Is there a study on satisfaction rates? 3. Does the area have a relevance to special routes such as running or cycling tracks? 4. Can the area be used for the continuity of a green urban axis? 5. Can the area be used for the continuity of an urban-scale water element? 6. Could the site be part of a custom-designed experience route? 7. Is there a municipal strategy that facilitates the implementation of special solutions for children, the elderly, and the disabled? Climate. 1. What is the sunshine hours of the area? 2. What is the prevailing wind direction of the area? 3. What is the climate of the region? B. Sociocultural context. Location, meaningful places and spaces. 1. What are the focal structures in neighboring plots? What meaning do they have for users? 2. What are the focal structures in the neighborhood where the project is located? What are their meanings? Do they already have a relevance to the project or can they have in the future? 3. What are the most important focal structures in the city where the project is located? What are their meanings? Do they already have a relevance to the project or can they have in the future? 4. Should the space be publicly inviting or should it be closed and private? 5. Should the building be an icon or an harmonizer? Or can the positive features of both types be considered together? C. Historical context. Past and today. 1. For what purposes was the area used in the past? Do these purposes contain such valuable details that they can be indirectly included in the design today? Summarize the past usage of the field and associated meanings with 5 keywords. Future. 1. For what purpose can the space be used in the future? What would be the most appropriate functions that prepare the area for the future? For instance, is there a possibility that the area will be included in a sustainability scenario? Summarize the prominent concepts regarding the future potentials of the area with 5 keywords. D. Multitasking. 1. You need to make inferences by considering all layers together. For this you will need to assess all the sketches together. Magic 4. Form. What will you learn in Form section? In the Form section, you will learn how to create a mass design by combining the information you learned in the content and context steps. In this section, you will understand why modulation is important, why every organic form needs a spine, and the importance of function determining form. A. Discovery. Question 1. What are the concentration areas of linear connections? Start drawing bubble diagrams by enclosing these regions into rectangles. Most students don't know this great method. It's a secret yet simple formula that's almost halfway through your reward, drawing parallels. Divide the area into countless parts by drawing parallels of surrounding buildings, roads, sidewalks, trees, circulations. If you have an ellipse, circle, or triangle around you, draw their parallels as well. It's equivalent in AutoCAD, offset. This is the golden rule of balanced design. Highlight prominent lines. This is everything. Yes, we are doing an exercise with the situation right here. Sometimes take one parallelism and connect it to another parallelism with the axis shift method. Meanwhile, straight lines turn into curves and create new, organic forms. These forms do not have to be the form of your building. However, they will make it very easy for you to think of functions together, as they are very similar to the forms in your bubble diagram. Now, combine your sketches from the content and context step with this elliptical grid and start to create. B. Analysis. Question 1. When all the implications of the content and context sections are considered together, how do linear connections occur in the field? Draw quickly. It is challenging to think of all the layers together. In the meantime, you may have to throw away some work. But relax. They will all add a certain depth to your project. At this point, you can make use of positive and negative spaces as you are now seeking clarity regarding the form of your design. For example, in this image, the orange lines can represent the building as well as the void. To decide this, put the layers in order of importance. C. Invention. Redraw the bubble diagram you drew earlier, this time with floor plans in isometric form. Yes, some groups have already appeared. At this point, you should remember what you have learned. Avoiding obvious symmetry, creating spaces suitable for flow, thinking about sunbathing, wind, pedestrian vehicle circulation. As these are the most important elements, they will directly affect the final draft of your form. You can now draw your relevant sketches highlighting green spaces and concentrate on checking your neighborhood's specifications. D. Integration. Question 1. Highlight the circulation connections between function blocks by drawing bold lines. This way, make blurry links clear. As the spaces in the functional program find their place in the area in detail, all the steps you have learned continue to merge layer by layer. This starts to transform the design from its complex state to a simple and realistic form. If you've started sketching your functions as you would a ground floor plan, feel free to draw arrows that show the connections and relationships between the functions. These arrows will always be in your mind and will guide you intuitively as you determine the shape of the building. E. Form development. Sketch them all in the field so you can see your unclear ideas together. This mess will help you think holistically. Finally, the first orthogonal sketch appeared. While sketching, don't stick to a fixed form and keep thinking about your design. Let orthogonal solutions represent technical areas, elliptical solutions represent areas of stretch and freedom. If you think of linear lines as spines, you can try any form you want in the rest of the building, keeping that linearity. Without sacrificing functionality, of course. The box sketches here remind us that the building will not only be considered horizontally, but also vertically. Terraces, height differences, harmony and contrast to the human scale. All of them will determine your design. Summary of the form section. A. Discovery, in search of form. 1. What are the concentration areas of linear connections? Start drawing bubble diagrams by enclosing these regions into rectangles. B. Analysis, ideas and concepts. 1. What are the concentration areas of linear connections? Start drawing bubble diagrams by enclosing these regions into rectangles. C. Invention, define the form. 1. When all the implications of the content and context sections are considered together, how do linear connections occur in the field? Draw quickly. D. Schematic design and integration. 1. Redraw the bubble diagram you drew earlier, this time with floor plans in isometric form. E. Form development. 1. Sketch them all in the field so you can see your unclear ideas together. This mess will help you think holistically. Form a modular exercise section. In this section you will see a course buying technique that you can apply to all building types. A very important reminder about this technique: this logic does not necessarily mean that the building must be in orthogonal form. This logic can be applied even in the most organic forms, and the summary is this: the way the entrance hall, cores, branches, focal spaces, and open spaces are interrelated is actually based on extremely simple linear, hierarchical branches. Core and spines. This is everything. 1. When you see a cube, first start thinking of it as the main core. Immediately afterward, consider how the lines that need to be connected to the core might be. It's easiest to start with linear spines that connect to a core. Connect the functions in the program to the center in linear segments. 2. Of course, you will first need corridors. Corridors can be widened or narrowed according to the functions and the number of users. Do not limit your design power by thinking too much about such details at the beginning. In the first steps, you can make impulsive moves. The important thing is to be able to produce solutions that will refine these moves in the next steps. 3. But what we have to think primarily about now is the hierarchy between public spaces. Which of the spaces around the building was more suitable for the public flow in the analyses we made in the context step? Remember, the spaces surrounding the building are not of equal importance. Some serve pedestrians, some serve vehicles. 4 and 5. For this, it is necessary to make the first move to disrupt the static, central structure of the building and help it to be shaped with an asymmetrical balance. In this way, the order of importance among the functions of the building begins to be visible from the outside. Even one small move defines the eastern part as an autonomous area separate from the other L. 6. While all this is happening, separation and integration continues. Do not look at any move as permanent. Design is dynamic. Do not think that the building mass is complete. The form is just created. But don't forget to ask yourself, at what stage is it now? What are the positive and negative sides of this L shape? What does this L shape provide for landscape areas? 7. If a part of the building is too close to the plot boundaries, perhaps a more balanced fragmentation may be required. Of course, keep in mind that during this disintegration, the pink center reserved for the nucleus may also enlarge. This could mean a larger, more spacious, or brighter atrium. The pink prism may herald a new modulation. 8 and 9. It is also necessary to be flexible about the total area. Maybe you will need to take some functions that you will use on the first floor to the ground floor. Perhaps you will need to enlarge the entrance hall even more. And as you can see, there are now parallels of building lines in the composition. Continue to enrich the design by finding new parallels, as in the intuitive design step. 10. And now feel free to demonstrate the corridor. How should the gray parts between the blue parts be displayed? As pushed or pulled? Because corridors are great agents for breaking up the mass. Look, already the density points of the building are starting to become visible. 11. Here is the example we just mentioned. The advantage of such protruding corridors is that they offer a vista where you can see the surroundings 180 degrees. But right now the design has another problems. The design has become too close to the limit on either side. The project area cannot be used in a balanced way, and the atrium looks bigger than it should be due to the north combination with the blue pieces. 12. But first, you need to see what you can do by placing the remaining functions upstairs. Meanwhile, the atrium got a little smaller and more balanced. Yes, the corridors have shattered the size of the facades, but still the facades are extremely monotonous. What you need to change that is a sense of rhythm. Bring rhythm to the pieces that make up the building. 13. Building modules A and B on the south facade would be a good step. This created small terraces, and the modular pieces help you define the south facade as the main facade. When you see such modulation, you may think of functions that are clearly displayed to the outside, like workshop classrooms or exhibition halls. 14. Of course, the search for a similar rhythm should continue for the roof of the building. However, even at this step, do not consider any action you take as an action that definitively determines the form of the structure. This sounds weird to some of you, doesn't it? You say why? The structure is already formed. No. What is being created is the preliminary sketch, not the final product. 15. And here it is, another bold attempt. These are just the design exercises that need to be done. Without dividing your building into enough parts, you won't know how it will blend in with the landscape. You should think of the parts of your building as the tentacles of a modular octopus. The entrance, which includes the atrium, acts as the brain. The vertical circulation line close to it is the heart. 16. Keep thinking about the layout of your building as you make minor changes. These should not be just visual, arbitrary changes. All your inferences from the context step must be active to be used in these steps. And now you have to ask the following questions: which facade was designed to emphasize which function? Which function should be emphasized more? 17. Keep thinking about the layout of your building as you make minor changes. These should not be just visual, arbitrary changes. All your inferences from the context step must be active to be used in these steps. And now you have to ask the following questions: which facade was designed to emphasize which function? Which function should be emphasized more? 18. Your building still looks big compared to the surrounding buildings, doesn't it? It's normal. Remember, you are still in the draft phase and working with modules. You will have time for details such as height and width. But as you can see in the picture, creating an open space to the left of the entrance is just about now. Consider the public flow and complete the main modulation decisions. That is all. 19. Of course, you will also need open spaces on the north facade. So find a balance in the layout. Instead of defining a very obvious entrance cube, make the pink mass work like an element that fuses with other pieces, finding the asymmetrical balance itself. Let it be attached to the main axis, but also related to the branches. A balanced structure has already formed. 20. And to better understand the point of your design, divide the land into segments using the building's edge lines as reference lines. Each part can serve a different function and be processed using a different modulation technique. Well, what if this mass were an elliptical, circular structure? Then again, you would divide the project area with parallels. We have come to the end of the first part of this section. Now watch the videos that explain what is done after this step and learn the basic tactics of detailing the structure before the rendering step. Remember, you can use these tactics in any form of build. What will you learn in Form, Alternatives and Modular Inspirations section? In this section, you will see some examples that will make it easier for you to diversify when working on a modulation. These examples will not only help you get an idea of the infinite number of combinations that evolve with modulation, but also offer strategies and tactics to help you flex it and transform it. 1. Grids for public spaces, basic modulations, urban continuity, neighborhoods. Trying to apply a reduced version of the dominant texture in the neighborhood is one of the common design tactics. Since it is seen frequently, it is not found as interesting by the jury as it used to be. But still, it can be used as a booster. For example, you can start creating your text by writing a sentence, such as the modulation in the study area was determined based on the size gradation in the gridal texture of the historical urban texture. 2. Combining parts, everything from a grid, a modular collage technique. Another way to benefit from the grid texture is to create new combinations by matching all the forms that can emerge from the squares or rectangles in it. Remember what we said earlier about the spine here. Once the spine has the required linearity, you can try any form you want in all areas. Of course, to ensure asymmetrical balance and without violating the form follows function principle as much as possible. 3. Parasitic architecture, containers, folding spaces, favelas. Slum architecture can also teach us a lot about the importance of modulations. Prefabricated modules made with limited resources can sometimes be a reflection of local texture and habits, and sometimes a result of the needs of a disaster area. In both cases, the diversity of volumes created by the presence and absence of horizontal and vertical surfaces triggers creativity. Straw bales, diagrid systems, bricks, masonry, trapezoidal slabs. Try hybrid solutions in a modular framework. 4. Roots of ants, natural bumps, movements of worms, architecture of erosions. In general, amateurs sketch organic forms as if they were painting. However, organic form-inspired productions in architecture are necessarily a stretched or derived version of a modulation. Hadid, Libeskind or Gehry. You can be sure that the chaotic-looking setup in all of them emerged from a gridal system. And their most important inspiration is nature. This brings up a sentence that will answer many of our questions: good and striking architecture is rationalized nature. That's it. Presentation, all in one section. In this section, we will examine how you can use the content, context, and form information you have learned so far in a sample project presentation. Just like when a project is presented to the jury, the parts that make up the layout will be shown in the required order and all the steps will be explained, from the step-by-step formation of the design to the details. This project is important in that it is quite simple and inclusive. Thanks to this feature, the basic logic in the presentation can be applied to many different projects. 1. The slide on which you will start the presentation must include the name of the project and the organization/institution for which the project was developed. However, it would be right to use one of the most comprehensive and effective visuals of the project on this slide. Be careful not to include an image with a specific detail of the project on the first slide, or to cover the page with abstract decorations. 2. The viewers saw the first image, learned the name of the project, learned what it was made for. Now they are more curious about the project. So, briefly list the steps of the presentation. Try to use odd numbers like 3, 5, 7. Try not to exceed 5 steps. 3. Of course, the first step should consist of steps such as approaching the field, approaching the subject, generating the concept, and establishing the context. So, you can choose a title such as Approach, General Approach, Theme, Context. Or, you can choose a field-specific short sentence that also implicitly has these meanings. 4 and 5. Before we begin, let's not forget that there is another important slide, a brief explanation of how the name of the project was formed, 3 simple diagrams that summarize the general approach in its simplest form, and a simple silhouette that explains how you take environmental criteria into account. By including these on 2 slides, you can explain how the leading drawings were instrumental in finding the name. The name should not be chosen to be impressive. It should be a combination of themes directly involved in the project. It should be clear, simple, and original. Of course, the jury might not like a hybrid name produced for the project. In this case, a name like Housing Design for Mukovets will also suffice. 6. There are 2 ways to start the first diagram. The first is the way in which a rough model is expressed as a monoblock, which expresses the preliminary sketch that will contain the volumes specified in the requirements program. The other is the option that starts with expressing the data directly on the vacant lot and in the immediate surroundings. Here, you see the first option implemented. The reason for this situation is that the project is inefficient in terms of close environment data and the competition has an operability-oriented approach within the clearance/mass housing. So, before you come to this step, be sure to start presenting the possibilities for your mass after presenting the entire environmental context on top of an isometric diagram that includes the near environment more comprehensively. 7. After showing the viewer what the space as a monoblock would look like if it were completely filled with mass, start with publicity, which should be considered the most important of the requirements. Use pullbacks in the model to highlight areas of public character. The continuity of publicity and the creation of an organic flow between the entrance and exit will be the 2 things you should pay attention to at this point. 8. In this step, you can see that by emphasizing the horizontal traces, the dominant length of the area is cut by roofs perpendicular to it, and thus the area is divided in a balanced way. The most important criteria you need to pay attention to when creating roofs are, respectively, the sun, wind and precipitation directions prevailing in the region. If you slope the roof in the right direction, you can save solar energy, provide natural ventilation, and save rainwater for secondary use. 9. Among these criteria, the most important one is insolation analysis. You must have a simple diagram of the dominant sunning direction of the area. 10. If the central decisions about your mass design are starting to become visible, start contemplating what might happen on the periphery of the space. In this example, a greenhouse structure is considered surrounding the mass housing units. 11. It is very important that the rhythm of the surrounding element in terms of design is in unity with the elements in the center. That's why you see the greenhouse structure transform to accommodate a more fragmented design. 12. Now, in addition to the continuity of publicity, one can talk about the continuity of green. The continuity of this water element can be diversified with substrates such as the continuity of cycling and hiking trails. When you evaluate all the layers that should show continuity together, you create hybrid areas, and this is a very valuable input for the originality of the project. 13. Now you can see that you have completed the steps of the mass design as best you can so far. So there is a need for an overview and to relate it to the concept. In this slide, try to answer a question: do pedestrian movement and mass effects in the area match the concept? Explain what you want to illustrate with 3 new little diagrams that will best express this overlap. 14. And it's time to see all the layers separately in one isometric diagram. At this point, you must take into account the environmental context and show the effect of environmental elements on the area with roads and arrows. In this example, since the features of the prefabricated system are wanted to be highlighted, no environmental data is shown as there is no environmental data, and this is a very exceptional situation. If there is no special situation, show the possibility of passing through your green area, surrounding buildings, ring roads, access axes. 15. Now viewers can begin to delve into the project by seeing one of the main renders. It makes it easy for your narrative about this project to be imaginable and gives the audience a fun break. 16. Since we started with the diagrams, we can say that it is time to see the site plan. We will talk about which of the expressions such as elevation, slopeline should be included in the layout plan according to the desired scale in the section about scales. For now, we just need to know that we need to see the site plan before we can see an isometric diagram showing the actions in the field. This simplicity in the layout is suitable for scales 1:500 and 1:1000. More details are expected at the 1:200 site plan scale. 17. The difference with this isometric diagram is that, as we just mentioned, it shows actions. It is a good idea to present the diversity of activities in the space, to highlight the continuity of publicity in the space. Don't just display them as icons. Support your narrative by presenting new route diagrams, live segments, and renderings of the action on the next slides that bring these actions to life. 18. So don't forget the importance of access scenarios. Here you see a diagram showing how the corridors were created by modular reduction. On the left, a corridor was opened under the greenhouse in the middle to ensure the continuity of green, and on the right, how to reach the greenhouse from the lower level for daily gardening works. Such diagrams make it easy for you to describe all the actions taken in the field. 19. If you have completed what you are going to tell about the general approach, in this section you will need to present the most important features of the project with plan, section, views. For this, it is very important to choose a name that fits the general characteristics of the project. The installation title is used here because the system is prefabricated. It is not like a normal reinforced concrete system. There is a certain modularity concern. It can be transformed by means of steel carriers. In short, in the second part, the name should reflect the leading values of the project. 20. Again, specific to this project, with the word installation we actually mean all the stages of a prefabricated process. It is necessary to include that infrastructure and sustainability details are also transformable, degradable, and developable. Is it enough to build a dynamic modular solution on top of a static infrastructure? Instead, it would be a better solution to construct a system that is open to development as both infrastructure and superstructure. This cross-section perspective also hints at another technical isometric diagram, which we'll see on the next slide, in the context of water collection and the relationship to green. 21. Unlike the main render we saw at first, seeing such a public access render is important to explain the flow under the greenhouse, the dividers and the common space life. It also means taking a fresh break before seeing the technical diagram we just mentioned. 22. This isometric diagram is a diagram where we can see the technical flow in the context of sustainability relations and show the infrastructure and superstructure together. Water tanks, modular units, wind and pedestrian tracks, summer bridges, seasonal vegetation. 23. This isometric diagram is a diagram where we can see the technical flow in the context of sustainability relations and show the infrastructure and superstructure together. Water tanks, modular units, wind and pedestrian tracks, summer bridges, seasonal vegetation. 24. You have to submit the blueprints along with the technical requirements such as elevation information, north arrow. The important thing here is to see that you can present the plans by processing them to show two different scenarios. The slide titled Linear Connections prepares the viewer for the upcoming slide titled Organic Evolution. 25. The slide Organic Evolution offers a flexible possibility of how the initial linear setup can be transformed as the prefabricated system allows. This diversity is very important for the integrity of the project. Thanks to this scenario flexibility, new facades, niches, hybrid spaces are formed. Another issue to be considered here is how linear landscape elements are spread over the area with an asymmetrical balance. Examine the distribution of green tissue within the gray grids and consider that organic solutions can also be produced by adhering to linear axes. 26. For those that you cannot show on the plan, the cross-section is an indispensable tool. Thanks to a living section, you can show all the elements you see on the right in one go, and consider pedestrian movement, popular spots, solutions that directly support the concept of the project, together with the landscape and the elements on the periphery. Don't forget to use different human silhouettes, realistic landscape elements, elevation information and scale-appropriate full-empty expression. The drawing technique in this example seems sufficient for 200 and 500 scales. In 100 scale, it would be necessary to give more details and it would be necessary to include the furnishing elements. We'll get into the details of scales later. 27. As we mentioned before, the general approach of the project should determine the style of the presentation. On this slide, you see 3 floor plans of a basic module. The relationship of the module with the landscape must be shown. Axes, on the other hand, are drawn to express how the prefabricated system is resolved with a rational setup. 28. And a question to animate the presentation allows us to talk about how these modular units turned into a mass housing unit while presenting the plans. The modular units are arranged organically, creating a mass housing project. 29. Base module is the typical prefabricated module that has not yet started to be modified. 30. On the next slide, we see an extension that adds a dining area to the living space. 31. Another step in how the typical unit can be transformed in an original way by solving a conservatory and study room to the north. And thanks to these steps, we have also shown how the organic evolution layer, which we showed in the previous slide, looks like. 32. Now it is necessary to show the most important aspects. Sometimes you must present only the north and south facades, and sometimes whichever are the most important facades determined by the form of the project. Here, we see that the southern facade stands out with maximum solar gain and the northern facade stands out with minimum wind effect. 33. At this point, you can continue to show some abstractions and renderings without moving on to the third part. 34. And more importantly, you can show that the prefabricated system offers important solutions not only in mass housing solutions, but also in supporting units. In the isometric diagrams here, it is explained that modular units holding onto greenhouse modulation can also enable library, bookstore, workshop, cinema, grocery, exhibitions, retail functions. 35. And an isometric diagram of how all these units were designed with an understanding of sustainability prepares the audience for the third part. On the south facade, you can see the movable greenhouse cover and the vertical planting structure. 36. The northern facade has a more closed facade than the south. All strategies needed to minimize heat losses can be included in these slides. It is important at this point that the passages connected to the summer bridges also allow fire escape. In addition, summer crossings also work as wind barriers to the north by carrying the planting modules. 37. Another simplified render. A simplified rendering that allows you to read the greenhouse, planting units, and mass housing units separately gives the impression that you have thought through all the layers in detail and carefully designed the overall composition. Not every render has to be colorful and crowded. 38. When we come to the technical section, we see better why we need to present the project in 3 steps. This is the section where the technical details and system solutions of the requested items are given within the scope of the project. 39. So, we start by seeing the ground floor of the foundation module. The information regarding the basic module, of course, also applies to all converted units. Thermal mass, secondary shading, hot water, fresh air, polluted air, augmentable greenhouse structure. You can show all the important information you can give in this isometric perspective before moving on to the system details. 40. The next slide is about acoustic comfort. Outsourced noise, air-sourced noise, shock/beat sourced noise, installation-sourced noise. Steel-framed balcony as a shading component, effective usage of south windows, minimum openness, summer bridges. All the details will increase the legibility of the project. 41. On this slide, you see the interior ventilation and fire safety features. It will always be enjoyable for the audience to be able to follow the details in the isometric diagram. In this sense, the isometric diagram is the type of diagram that offers the most effective solutions. It is easy to understand and can be superimposed. 42. When we come to the attic floor, we see the natural daylight title. Photovoltaic panels, skylights help to maintain the thermal comfort values of the mass. 43. You can summarize all your explanation by gathering all the isometric diagrams you have shown so far in a single diagram. This is very important to remind viewers of what they saw and give a holistic view of the project. 44. It will be necessary to show another example of the simplified render that we have just seen, in order to explain the project from different angles. Users need perspectives from different angles to imagine life in the field. 45. And then there are the 150 details. Presenting all the system features described so far on which carriers are carried, in an isometric system cross-section perspective before showing them in the system sections, makes it easier for the viewers to understand the details. Steel structural elements differ in the wall and floor and enrich the section perspective. 150 sectional perspective, what is the structure of the mass, and what are modular elements, should be able to answer questions. 46. Now it's time for details such as 120, 110. While showing the details, it might be a smart idea to show where the details belong with a second drawing on the right. Let's start with the roof plus wall against air detail, respectively. 47. In the ceiling detail, take care to be able to show the console, if any, and all related insulation layers at once. 48. The ground detail, on the other hand, expresses shelter in terms of water and heat in the relationship of the mass with the ground. 49. In the row house layout, you can show the relationship of a prefabricated module with the neighboring building with the wall against neighborhood detail. 50. There is a required technical calculation within the scope of the project. It should be included in the last slides as much as possible. The most important data that makes your project unique should be your approach and original solutions before numbers. Of course, you should present figures as summarized data, not boring tables. 51 and 52. After all, it's time to move on to closing. You can make a strong closure by showing viewers a render they haven't seen before. While you say a few sentences summarizing the project on the render, they will have enough time to examine the image and think about the project a little more. A thank you sentence on the same image will be enough to complete the presentation. See you in the next section. What will you learn in presentation, combining pieces in one presentation board section? In this section, you will see how the components that make up the presentation video you watched in the previous section are included in a single architectural sheet. In this way, you will also learn the differences that should be noted between a jury presentation and a layout design. If you're ready, let's start. Introvertical. We will now look at the holistic map of the introvertical project, whose presentation you have watched step by step before. Unlike the presentation on the sheet, it is necessary to proceed with a setup that can be understood at first glance. Nevertheless, it is necessary to follow a similar order in the presentation on the sheet. Let's remember how we started to examine the space to explain the idea, thanks to the steps of modular dividing, urban spaces and continuity, horizontal traces, formation of sunlight, greenhouse structure, continuity of green, introvertical concept. The general framework of the project was drawn. It is very important to leave enough spaces on the right and left of the sheet, to use the right fonts, and to stick to a certain color palette. The correct expression of the concept of social evolution is also very important. It's always a good idea to provide a render alongside the blueprint. The main narration is completed by giving the sustainable section, layers of a module, additional volumes, south and north facades, optional usage, night view sequence, plan and section before the system detail. Here, the social and sustainable transition section is an important section in that it shows many concepts and layers at once. Thermal and acoustic details, ventilation details are given below. On the whole, the importance of such a hierarchical order in completing the narrative of the overall project can easily be seen. Good luck! What will you learn in presentation, combining pieces in one presentation board section? In this section, you will see how the components that make up the presentation video you watched in the previous section are included in a single architectural sheet. In this way, you will also learn the differences that should be noted between a jury presentation and a layout design. If you're ready, let's start. Introvertical. We will now look at the holistic map of the introvertical project, whose presentation you have watched step by step before. Unlike the presentation on the sheet, it is necessary to proceed with a setup that can be understood at first glance. Nevertheless, it is necessary to follow a similar order in the presentation on the sheet. Let's remember how we started to examine the space to explain the idea, thanks to the steps of modular dividing, urban spaces and continuity, horizontal traces, formation of sunlight, greenhouse structure, continuity of green, introvertical concept. The general framework of the project was drawn. It is very important to leave enough spaces on the right and left of the sheet, to use the right fonts, and to stick to a certain color palette. The correct expression of the concept of social evolution is also very important. It's always a good idea to provide a render alongside the blueprint. The main narration is completed by giving the sustainable section, layers of a module, additional volumes, south and north facades, optional usage, night view sequence, plan and section before the system detail. Here, the social and sustainable transition section is an important section in that it shows many concepts and layers at once. Thermal and acoustic details, ventilation details are given below. On the whole, the importance of such a hierarchical order in completing the narrative of the overall project can easily be seen. Good luck! Summary of the presentation section. A. Graphic communication. Determine the 2 or 3 fonts you will use. Don't stick to one font. Skillfully balance fonts to create a contemporary contrast. For detailed information on this topic, watch the fonts section. Choose 1, 2, or 3 highlighter colors to use. Skillfully balance fonts to create a contemporary dynamism. For detailed information on this topic, watch the colors section. Make a folder of the best arrows. Make a folder of best dashed lines and dashed circles. Make a folder of the finest north arrows and denim lines. Download the contest winners' layouts to find the best sample layouts. Make a folder from these layouts. Take notes on the most prominent aspects of each sheet. B. Pre-planning. Prepare a sample collage sheet with your favorite layouts. Using this sheet in Photoshop or Illustrator, create a new hole for each drawing by cutting out parts from your favorite layout. C. Checklist. Evaluate the collage sheet you created with the drawings and the layouts you like in terms of its suitability for your project, and associate your drawings with a suitable composition, taking into account the criteria in the Layouts section. Place the items you have been hiding in folders such as arrows, dashed lines, colors, circles, north arrows and denim lines on your layouts to complete the composition. Magic 4. Content, context, form, presentation. End of section. In this episode, you've seen the strategy and tactics you need to make the most of the 4 we call Magic 4. Remember, let's repeat the simplest tip we need to take. There is no context without content, no form without context, and no presentation without these 3. Especially in some amateur works, it is seen that some unnecessary ornaments are made in form and presentation steps without reaching sufficient technical maturity. This is absolutely wrong. The biggest benefit of this section is that it teaches that all exercises should be considered together. Good luck in the next episode.